On this year when I am 60 years old. My husband Sean took sleeping pills without warning. When I found him, he was wearing a Chinese tunic suit ironed by me himself, lying neatly on the bed, with a slight smile still on the corner of his mouth. For a moment, I actually didn't know the reason for his suicide. It wasn't until I found a letter in his arms. My wife Vera. I have fulfilled my lifelong promise and allowed our child to walk in the world openly and above board. Now, our son is successful in his career and a grandchild is about to be born. I have no more concerns. Life and death are separated by two realms. True love is hard to hold. I can finally be freed from this unhappy marriage. This is Sean's own handwriting. The strokes are sharp and every word pierces the heart. And my wife, in the letter, is not me. True love is not me. It is me who makes him unhappy. I looked at Sean on the bed, who died contentedly after more than 30 years of marriage. It seems that I have never really understood him, but I have dedicated most of my life to him and raised his son with my own hands. He is fulfilled, without regrets, and has died. But he doesn't even bother to pretend to me anymore. At the age of 60, I found out that I have been deceived for half my life. I have become a joke. In fact, I should have realized it earlier. The details of not loving are everywhere in the wedding. Sean slept in a separate room from me and used separate tableware on the grounds of having. Except for talking about our son. He wouldn't care about my affairs or share his daily life with me. Later, there was a problem in that aspect. And there was no more conjugal life. But I didn't dare to have any complaints. Because I have a deformed uterus and am infertile. Sean can't have his own child. In those days, a woman like me who couldn't have children was beaten, cheated on, and divorced, all of which were taken for granted. In my 20s, when I thought my life was over, it was Sean who firmly held my hand and told me it was okay. At most, we could adopt one. I was grateful for his unwavering companionship and took great care of him and the adopted son. He is engaged in chemical research. His job is often transferred. I gave up my golden rice bowl at the newspaper office for him and took care of household chores. When he was down and out, I only ate and gave all the vegetables and meat to their father and son. I didn't buy a new piece of clothing for 3 years. So much so that they still think that I like to eat coarse grains. Don't like to eat meat. Like to wear old clothes that are washed soft. And like to study the styles of patches. Sometimes I also feel wronged. But thinking of my debt to Sean, I can only sigh silently. There is always expectation in my heart. Thinking that when we are old, we can also be respectful to each other and have children around us. But after finally enduring until this day, what I waited for was Sean's liberation. I want to cry out loud and curse. But half a lifetime is too heavy, weighing me down so much that I can't breathe. I slumped to the ground, like a fish about to drown. My mouth was open, but I couldn't utter a single syllable. I don't know how long it had passed. The light and shadow outside the window changed. A tear dropped on the back of my hand. I suddenly came to my senses. My gaze fell on the old wooden box with a lock under Sean's bed. That was his privacy that I couldn't violate. But now, I found a fire axe and broke open his privacy. Inside the box were several thick stacks of handwritten letters. Some were yellowed with age. Some were curled at the edges, as if they had been repeatedly rubbed. Knowing that these letters would turn into sharp blades and stab me one by one, I still trembled and stubbornly opened them one by one. My wife Vera. Next month is my wedding day. In order not to have other children after marriage, I had a vasectomy today. In my life, there will only be CE as a child. My wife Vera. Forgive me for sleeping with another woman. In fact, I am also very disgusted. I almost couldn't get hard. I kept telling myself that it was all for CE. I have to endure humiliation. My wife Vera. I am really tired of Vera. Fortunately, I thought of a good way. I told her that I haven't slept in a separate room from her and used separate tableware. Only in this way can I endure it. My wife Vera. It has been a year since we got married. Vera can't get pregnant. I asked someone to make a certificate of her infertility. She was so ashamed. I think I can mention adopting a child to her after some time. My wife Vera. I have good news for you. The son has been successfully brought back. My wife Vera. Today I hurt myself. I smashed my lower body to keep my chastity for you. My wife Vera. My wife Vera. These 4 words lingered in my mind and ears and couldn't be dispelled no matter what. I only felt dizzy and had tinnitus. A breath was stuck in my chest and then sank into my stomach. My stomach had a spasm. Finally, I rushed to the toilet and vomited violently. For I vomited so much that it was dizzying. It took me 3 attempts to stand up with the help of the toilet. When I came out of the bathroom, I saw this home where I had lived for more than 30 years. The bedroom I shared with Sean was separated by an entire living room. Clearly distinct. On the dining table that hadn't been tittied up yet. The tableware of the family was of different styles, and didn't interfere with each other. Because Sean said he had. After the son grew up and understood, he followed suit. Gradually, everything in our family was allocated. Even the sofas were. No one touched anyone else. Once, I was so tired that I sat on Sean's sofa. Sean was furious and was so angry that he didn't eat. Later, I coaxed him for a long time and took off the sofa cover and washed it before I could coax him well. Even today, when I found Sean dead, I stood at the door of the room for 5 minutes. No matter how I called him, he didn't wake up. Only then did I have to break in. Unconsciously, I almost became the most boundary-conscious nanny in this family. Just then, my cell phone rang. My daughter-in-law's painful voice came. "Mom, I asked you to go home and get a warm milk bottle. Why did it take you so long? I'm about to enter the delivery room. Steven still has to answer a conference call from the company. I need you to take care of me." Hearing her gasping in pain, I felt a little distressed. After opening my mouth several times, I finally made a hoarse voice. "Mom will be back soon. Wait. Don't hang up the phone." My chaotic mind became much clearer. I told myself that I was still a mother and mother-in-law. Today is the day when my daughter-in-law gives birth. This is a top priority. How can the bad karma of the older generation affect the children? Even if the adopted son is Sean's illegitimate child, it's not his fault. How would he know that his father is such a person who is different on the outside and inside? He is the son I raised with all my efforts. He is my son. Sean, since you want to die for love, then take your secrets with that woman into the grave. I wiped away my tears and went into Sean's room to pack up his letters, will, and sleeping pills to eliminate the traces of his suicide. It would be good if the son found him when he came home and thought he had died suddenly. But just when I was tittying up the drawer, I found Sean's cell phone. I was afraid that he would leave traces. So I opened it. But I saw that there was a timed email on it. The recipient was the son. 5 instantly. An extremely bad premonition enveloped me. I still trembled and opened this email. "My son Ce. When you receive this email, Dad is already dead. Forgive Dad's selfishness. Forgive me for really being enabled to endure your stepmother. Don't be sad for me either. For me, having fulfilled my promise to your mother in this life is already very fulfilling." I read these lines of cold words in disbelief. The picture in front of me became trembling. My fingers became stiff and it was even difficult to slide the screen. So, Steven knew everything. He and his father and biological mother are a family. Then what am I? What is my upbringing for half my life? I slumped to the ground and, unwilling to give up, I scrolled back. Unexpectedly, the content later really made me feel as if I had fallen into an ice skate. Now that you are about to have a son and are successful in your career, Dad has nothing more to help you. Only by leaving everything to you can I relieve you of the burden of supporting the elderly. I have arranged for your stepmother whom you hate. I added a newly developed biological poison to her insulin. The poison is chronic. When it takes effect, the daughter-in-law will just be out of confinement. She will make her final contribution and then die. At that time, the death insurance I bought for her will also take effect. The beneficiary is you. Vera has no relatives. No one will check the cause of her death. Even if they do, the murderer will only be me. I will leave with a bad reputation and return you a perfect life. Finally, remember to bury the letters in the lockbox under my bed together with me and bury them with your mother. 6 In the scorching summer. A chill rose from the soles of my feet and froze me in place. It seemed that there was a vacuum in my ears and I couldn't hear anything. Suddenly, I remembered that every year on Stephen's birthday, the father and son would disappear for the whole morning. I remembered that when Stephen ran away from home because I disciplined him, when he was a child and cried and shouted to find his biological mother. It was me who searched all night in the heavy rain before I found him. I remembered that one day my daughter-in-law bought a bunch of white chrysanthemums but couldn't explain clearly who they were for. The past spun in my mind, like a revolving lantern. I was in a mess, but I had never been as clear-headed as at this moment. After a long while, I controlled my cold body, quietly found my medicine box, took away the tampered insulin, and replaced it with another box to cover up. I took pictures of Sean's will, letters, and text messages, and then put them back in place. I took away the real estate certificate, passbook, and all jewelry. Finally, I even saw Sean's weak breathing. He wasn't dead yet. I had a sneer on my lips, gently closed his door and let him die, carrying guilt and wealth. I came to the hospital like a walking corpse. I registered at the hematology department first. The blood test results came out quickly. There was slight poisoning, resulting in a decrease in platelet content. But it wasn't fatal yet. Then I went to the gynecology department to check my uterine problem. Just as I came out after the examination, I bumped into Stephen head-on. He seemed to be on a work call and was swaying over from the gynecology department. When he saw me, his irritable expression reached its peak. He impolitely pointed at me with his finger, then pointed at the delivery room, and kept urging me with his chin. It turns out that when you are awake, you can really see many things clearly. In the past, when I saw him in a suit and busy, I was proud of him and also sincerely felt sorry for and understood him. I was afraid of dragging down my child, and was willing to pay for him. But now, looking at his commanding attitude towards an old woman and thinking of the things he hid from me, and thinking of Sean casually telling him that he wanted to poison me, I only felt a chill in my heart. I ignored him and sat on the bench by myself, waiting for my examination report. Stephen's expression was like swallowing a fly. He quickly ended the call and walked quickly to my side and impolitely pushed me. "Mom, what's wrong with you? Today your daughter-in-law is giving birth. You are not waiting in the delivery room. What are you doing in the gynecology department?" Atai disgustedly patted the place he had touched. "Of course it's for a physical examination." Stephen directly rolled his eyes. "Mom, stop making trouble. You are almost 60. What are you doing in the gynecology department? Can't I come to the gynecology department when I am 60? Isn't a 60-year-old woman still a woman? When you heard that your mom came for an examination, didn't you even ask if your mom is feeling unwell?" I felt wronged in my heart. As I spoke later, my voice had a crying tone. I remembered that on the day Stephen was 8 years old, he got pneumonia and had a high fever that wouldn't go down. To take care of him, I didn't take off my clothes to sleep for half a month. I also missed the last meeting with my father before he died. Later, when Stephen got better, I wanted to go back to attend my father's funeral. But Sean left our son to me on the grounds that he couldn't leave his work. I wanted to take Stephen back to attend the funeral together. But Stephen was delicate and couldn't stand the bumpy train ride. In the end, I didn't leave the province and came back again. My elder brother was so angry that he cut off relations with me. This unfilial daughter. He scolded me as an ungrateful person and said that if I didn't care about my own relatives and raised someone else's son, I would be punished sooner or later. My brother's words came true. Thinking of the past, I directly retorted Stephen loudly. Was I this attitude when you were sick as a child? My voice was not low. Other people in the hospital looked at us with disgusted eyes. Stephen always cared about face. He coughed and his tone softened. Moan. You know I didn't mean that. Isn't your daughter-in-law about to give birth? I'm just anxious. How can our family do without you? Can't do without me? Yes. I can't be separated when a nanny is needed. After all, Sean is engaged in academics and Stephen is doing business. The parents-in-law are traveling in the Maldives. I am always the only one who does the serving work. But what about later? I don't even have the right to live. I can't drag down my son. I have to exchange my life for an insurance payout for my son. I felt extremely sad in my heart. As I lowered my head, a tear dropped on my knee. My son was stunned. Just as he was about to ask something, his cell phone rang again. This time it was obviously not for work because when Stephen looked at his phone, he was as stunned as a statue. Calculating the time, Sean's timed text message should have arrived. 9. Sean had arranged everything. If it weren't for my daughter-in-law asking me to go home temporarily. At this moment, I should be waiting in the hospital while my son goes back to deal with his body. I would be completely ignorant of his conspiracy. Unfortunately, God has eyes and let me see it. Stephen was frozen in place and didn't move for a long time. After a while, he seemed to have digested his emotions. With evasive eyes, he said, Mom, I left an important document at home. I have to go back and get it quickly. As Stephen finished speaking, the last glimmer of hope in my heart was shattered. Just now, for a moment, I really hoped that this child, whom I raised with all my maternal love, could stand by my side just once. Even if he didn't tell me the truth. Just showed a little bit of resentment towards his father's actions. But he didn't. He is a complete and grateful person. Mom, go to the delivery room quickly. My wife can't do without people now. Stephen was preoccupied and urged me. Then he turned and left. At this time, his phone rang again. My daughter-in-law's voice came from the receiver. Husband. I asked Mom to go home and help me get something. She hasn't come back for a long time. Now I can't get through to her phone. Do you know where she is? My daughter-in-law was in pain and aggrieved. I'm giving birth to a child for the Lee family. As a result, none of you are here. I won't give birth to this child anymore. In the past at such times, my son would definitely humble himself and coax his wife. But at this moment, he was like a sculpture, frozen in place. He mechanically turned around and tremblingly asked me, Mom, did you go home just now? What answered my son was my bloodshot eyes. Stephen's face turned pale. He directly hung up the phone and ran away in a staggering manner. 10. I sat in a daze in the gynecology department for 2 hours. Finally, I got my physical examination report. Everything in my uterus was normal. I tightly clutched the report. My mind was filled with the white eyes and harsh treatment I suffered when I was young because I couldn't have children, and the happy expressions of my friends when they gave birth. I also thought of the little cotton-padded jacket of my neighbor who always spends money recklessly to buy her brand-name clothes and bags. But my adopted son gave me his mother-in-law's old clothes. He still thinks I like to wear old clothes. But he is in his 30s and is a sophisticated business elite. Does he really not know that no one likes old clothes? He just doesn't care about me. I was immersed in grief and didn't notice Stephen coming over in a flustered manner. He tentatively asked, Mom, why haven't you answered the phone? You know Dad committed suicide, right? Why didn't you save him? This series of questions made me only want to sneer. I said coldly, how would I know? He doesn't let me enter his room. Stephen was choked. But obviously he was relieved. If I didn't enter the room, I naturally wouldn't see Sean's letters, and wouldn't know his conspiracy. So he resumed his usual interrogative tone. Then what's wrong with you today? You don't care about your daughter-in-law giving birth and you don't care about my dad's suicide. Don't you care about anything? Are you really my mom? Oh. I am indeed not his mother. I asked him in return. Are you really my son? You only care about your wife and your dad. Have you asked me even one question? Am I your mom or your nanny? I stared at Stephen intently. I have already gone through menopause and can't have children. This ungrateful person in front of me is my only son. The only son I have raised with all my life's efforts. Perhaps feeling guilty, Stephen was choked again. But after just a moment, he flew into a rage. Mom, have you made enough trouble? At this time, can't you put aside any minor ailments for later? 11 I looked at Stephen almost in shock. How could he talk to me so righteously? When did this child I raised with my own hands become completely rotten? Stephen was still chattering. Mom, you should reflect on yourself. Why didn't you know that your husband committed suicide? Have you really cared about your husband? Didn't I care? I did care. But Sean drew a line between us. I would make him angry if I entered his territory. He would get angry if I used his things. He would be impatient if I cared about his affairs. Even when he was sick, it was wrong for me to ask a few more questions. Later, I was gradually tamed by him. I learned to keep silent, only do things without speaking, and pace silently. After decades, all this has become taken for granted. I said inferently, I don't know why your dad committed suicide. Do you know? Stephen scratched his head. Mom, this should be your concern. Everyone in this society has a profession. Your profession is housewife. It's not the time to guess blindly now. You know that my dad hates it the most when you think too much. You go and take good care of my dad now. When he wakes up, you apologize well and he will forgive you. I responded inferently with an "oh." I was somewhat disappointed inside. Sean wasn't dead? It seems that Stephen saved him. Their family is indeed deeply affectionate. One commits suicide for love and the other saves lives. Only I am a damn outsider. At this time, Stephen's gaze fell on my examination report. He snatched it away and snorted. I want to see what disease you have. 12 After Stephen saw the content on the report clearly, he finally realized belatedly. His face turned green, and he was still trying to control his expression. Mom, aren't you infertile? Is this report wrong? After all, he was nervous and this revealed his lie. I have never told him that I am infertile. I even always told him that he is my biological child. I looked at Stephen and asked him, how do you know that I am infertile? Maybe my dad told me. I once asked him why there were no younger brothers or sisters. He said it casually to save face. Later I found out that it should be his problem. Stephen's acting skills are very poor and his words are contradictory. In fact, thinking back, Sean's acting skills are not good either. Just because I believed him, and was blinded by one leaf, I was deceived for my whole life. When Stephen was stammering, his phone rang again and again. This call saved him. Sean woke up. Stephen was really happy. He grabbed my shoulder with his big hand and urged me to take care of Sean. I was in great pain from his grip and coldly shook him off. Stephen's face also darkened. He patiently persuaded me. Mom, I know you are now. But even if my dad has done something wrong to you, it's all in the past. You are already old. Don't make trouble anymore. Yes. He is right. I am already old. I won't make trouble blindly. I will only cut the mess quickly. When Stephen saw that I wouldn't listen to soft words, he resorted to hard ones. His tone carried a warning. Mom, I advise you to be at the right time. You will still depend on my dad to support you in the future. If you don't show up at this time and my dad gets angry and divorces you, I won't have anything to say. After Stephen said these words, he left angrily. 13 It has been an afternoon since the incident happened. And I have calmed down. I am indeed 60 years old. But I am not penniless. Half of the property that Sean wants to leave to his son belongs to me. I took out all the family property and Sean's private property. I called my nephew. Sean doesn't know that I have always been in contact with my nephew. Although my elder brother cut off relations with me, I still pay attention to the movements of their family. But that year when my elder brother injured his leg, and there was no money for him to study, I sold my dowry jewelry and collected enough tuition fees for him. And the university that my nephew was admitted to is just in my city. During those 4 years in college, I went to cook for other people's families behind Sean's back and earned money to support my nephew. My nephew is a grateful person and would greet me on festivals. It's just that Sean doesn't like having people at home. So I only met him a few times outside. Now, my nephew is already an independent big lawyer. I called him and told him everything. My nephew was silent for a long time. He said through gritted teeth, "Aunt, don't worry. I will help you fight for property and send these villains to prison." Listening to the distress in my nephew's words, I silently shed tears. I received blatant concern. Only then did I clearly realize how pathetic that sporadic concern that only exists in words and needs me to continuously pay to get is. After all, for that pair of heartless father and son, I alienated my real relatives. My relatives by blood. My nephew took action immediately. An hour later, he appeared in the hospital. First, he took me to the Judicial Authentication Center and submitted the poison insulin for identification. Then he took me to the notary office to notarize the marital property. After being busy for an afternoon, my nephew took me to have dinner and wanted to take me back to his home. I said I wanted to go home once. My nephew advised me, "Aunt, don't go back. Your home is like a dragon's pond in the tiger's den. What if Sean wants to harm you again?" I shook my head. I still want to confirm one last thing. 14 as a mother, I actually have a glimmer of hope for Steven. If he still has a little bit of me as his mother in his heart, and quietly replaces the poison insulin, I will be lenient to him. After all, he is the child I raised with my own hands. My nephew had no choice but to accompany me. When we arrived at the door, there seemed to be voices coming from inside. My nephew quickly stopped me and motioned for me to be quiet. I learned from him and listened by lying on the door. Sean was actually back. The father and son were talking. Sean was very weak and his voice was as weak as a thread. I said that my will had been touched. "You didn't believe me. Now look. Even the box under the bed has been pried open. Vera must have entered my room. My will is okay. But there are too many things written in the box. Vera knows too much." Steven said anxiously, "You too. Why do you write everything in your will? In this day and age, you still do that handwritten letter thing all day long." Sean was so angry that he coughed several times. "A relationship between me and your mother is something you brat can understand? If it weren't for me loving only your mother all my life, would you have what you have today? Besides, when your wife gives birth, Vera should be in the hospital. How would I know that your wife asked her to come back?" Steven's voice weakened. "This is indeed an accident. But Dad, isn't this all because you want to commit suicide for love without telling me? Do you only think about Mom? Have you thought about me?" At this point, Steven's voice had a crying tone. And Sean also choked up. It seemed that they were the victims. It was my nephew who supported me and left. Until we got in the car, my nephew was secretly wiping tears. I also wiped tears. I am not a competent. I didn't care much about him usually. Now not only do I have to trouble him, but he also has to be sad with me. After crying enough, my nephew took me back to his home. He is not married, but his home is very clean. He has prepared the largest room in advance for his father. Now, he settled me in this room. As soon as we got home, he began to prepare the lawsuit process. In the next few days, my nephew asked for leave from the company and accompanied me running around wholeheartedly. During this period, that father and son called me countless times. I didn't answer any of them. Steven also sent me a photo of his newborn son, trying to make me soften. But this child has no blood relationship with me at all. Why should I be soft-hearted? I deleted the photo casually. A few days later, Steven borrowed a cell phone to call me. I thought it was a call from the court and answered it without thinking. As a result, Stephen was putting on a crazy show on the other end. Mom, where on earth are you? Can you stop making trouble? Don't you know that Dad committed suicide for you? This time it's really dangerous. He has even been admitted to the intensive care unit. Dad left a handwritten letter saying that he knows he was wrong. Only after losing you did he realize that you are the one he loves the most. As long as you come home, he will never think about the past again. Let's live a good life as a family. His voice was too loud. I found it noisy and moved the receiver away. There was nothing nutritious at the end. I said, "Oh." Stephen obviously didn't expect me to be so indifferent. He was stunned for a moment, and forced out a crying tone. Mom, my dad has something to say to you in person. He hung up the phone and made a video call. This time I answered. Not moved. I just wanted to see how that father and son would act. 17 in the video. Sean was lying on the hospital bed with tubes inserted. When his pair of cloudy old eyes looked at me, they were filled with deep affection. He weakly recalled our past. Chicui. Actually, when you came to our unit for an interview for the first time, I fell in love with you. Just at that time. I always thought about the dead person and couldn't think straight. Later, I also stubbornly thought, well, never mind. Unexpectedly, after living most of my life, I still don't understand. When I think of what I have done, I wish I could kill myself. Zhicui. I only understood after dying once that I really can't live without you. Come back quickly. Sean was performing affectionately, and an old tear also flowed down. And I, except for getting goosebumps all over, had no other feelings. I thought to myself, without watching 10 years of melodramatic dramas, one can't say such creepy words. At 60 years old, still talking about love. This old man really doesn't understand anything. I wanted to say something, but my nephew told me not to startle the snake before officially suing. I just shut up and watched his performance attentively. After Sean finished all the lines he could say, he found that I didn't show any sign of wavering at all. The old man's cloudy eyes rolled and suddenly leaned closer to the screen. He asked me menacingly, Chicui. Where are you now? I still want to see you one last time. The killing intent that flashed in Sean's eyes was clearly transmitted through the screen. I was startled and quickly hung up the phone. At night, I even had nightmares. I dreamed that Sean and Stephen surrounded me with knives and stabbed me viciously one by one. Until I woke up the next day. My mental state was very bad. I went downstairs in a daze to buy groceries. As a result, as soon as I went out, I was caught by the police. 18 I thought the comrades from the police station came to help me. Until they held me on both sides. I asked in panic, Comrade, why are you arresting me? The police explained, Auntie, don't panic. You don't know that you have Alzheimer's disease, right? We received a report from your husband and son, that you were deceived by someone and ran away with all the family property. We also had a hard time finding you. Don't worry. We will take you to find your family now. I quickly explained, I'm not sick. I came out by myself. I want a divorce. Auntie, people who are sick don't realize that they are sick. Your son has submitted your diagnosis report. You do have Alzheimer's disease. Good. Another diagnosis report. Sean and Stephen are using the same trick again. Haven't they installed enough diseases on me? I frantically explained that I was really not sick. But the police obviously believed the diagnosis report more. He pointed to my nephew who was being escorted down. This person is the one who cheated your money. Your family will not harm you. Seeing my nephew being handcuffed by the police, I was so angry that I struggled frantically. It attracted many onlookers. Some enthusiastic people were already muttering, could it be violent law enforcement? They took out their phones and started taking pictures. The police had to explain. My nephew took the opportunity and came close to me and comforted me. Aunt, don't worry. Whether you are sick or not will be known after being identified at the police station. The police will give us justice. They told such an easily exposed lie. There must be another purpose. We still need to be on high alert. I calmed down and thought what my nephew said made sense and cooperated with the police's actions. Sure enough, after half a day, my nephew proved his identity as a lawyer and his kinship with me. I also cooperated to prove that my mental state was normal. We reported the case, by the way, and officially charged Sean and his son with attempted murder. After coming out of the police station, I felt a great sense of relief and finally had a feeling of breathing easily. Next, as long as I go to the identification agency with my nephew to get the evidence, Sean and his son will be in big trouble. But I never expected that as soon as I walked out of the police station door, a figure pounced on me. By the time I reacted, Sean's hideous old face was very close. He was still holding a syringe. In the nick of time, when I thought I was done for, there were actually policemen rushing out. With a flying kick, they directly kicked Sean to the ground. This old man had committed suicide twice before. Now he can't make any more trouble. He stared at me with malicious eyes and cursed, "Lazy HICUI. You will not die well. You joined forces with outsiders to harm your husband and child. You can even do such a thing to the child you raised with your own hands. You are not worthy of being a human being." His shameless words made the policemen present couldn't help rolling their eyes. I had a lot of things I wanted to scold him, but I didn't know where to start. Saying one more word to this beast is a waste of breath. My nephew picked up the syringe on the ground and handed it to the police, saying angrily, "Comrade policeman, I just said that this old thing has no good intentions." He actually dared to commit a crime at the door of the police station. The poison in this syringe is probably the same as the poison he put in my client's insulin. Now we have caught him red-handed and he will be punished for multiple crimes. The public security took swift action, and soon collected the complete chain of evidence of Sean's crime. However, because Sean insisted that his son was unaware and Steve and didn't participate in the actual crime, only Sean was arrested in the end. Half a month later, Sean's attempted murder case and my divorce case were heard together. Before the trial, Stephen also appeared as a witness. He stopped me in the corridor and said a lot of things about his childhood, trying to awaken my maternal love. Let me take less property and leave more for him. He needs to raise a child. But I only found it ridiculous. In which of these things didn't I pay for him? What did he do for me? Giving me coarse grains or giving me old clothes? Don't even think about it. I won't give you a single cent. I pushed him away and walked in. But he was completely broken. He rushed in front of me and roared, "You haven't done any real work in your life. Why do you ask for so much of my dad's property? Just because you are a nanny? Have you never thought about how you will live the rest of your life when you are 60? Without a son to support you in your old age? Do you expect your nephew to support you?" 20 today. Looking at Stephen's menacing appearance, I won't be heartbroken anymore. I just want to sneer. What's wrong with being 60? It's not too late to turn back at 60. Because the evidence was complete. There was no suspense in Sean's judgment. Forging medical certificates, attempted murder, attempted homicide, and malicious insurance fraud. Punished for multiple crimes. He was sentenced to 30 years. He will die in prison. The judge approved my divorce application on the spot. Because Sean was at fault, most of the property was awarded to me. After the adjournment, Stephen chased me and scolded me for a whole street. It was nothing more than saying that I had taken away the money that belonged to him. I wasn't polite to him either. Following my nephew's advice, I posted what he had done online. Stephen soon became infamous and lost his job. His wife took their son and ran away. And I received a lot of sympathy from a large number of netizens. They were indignant and said that it was just an old lady. 1 yuan from you and 1 yuan from me to collect enough pension for the old lady. I refused their kindness. My property is enough for me to live on in my old age. Let them donate to those in need. But through this, I also felt the kindness of strangers. It is much warmer than my cold family. I opened my live streaming account and shared my daily life in old age, which was well received. Next, I plan to start a special topic on Arvit Raval. Starting a career at 60 is not too late. Before setting off on my trip, I went to see Sean in prison. I told him that in fact, I had heard about the old man's first love back then and also suspected Stephen's origin. At that time, there was no paternity test. I specifically checked the blood types. Sean is type O and Stephen is type AB. They can never be father and son. He is the one who has been deceived all his life. Sean's grayish lips trembled for a long time. When he got up, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of old blood, muttered, Vera. Vera. You deceived me so bitterly. I didn't look back. When I walked out of the prison and looked at the sun overhead, I chuckled. I lied. It seems that compared to his lover with a destined 3 lifetimes of love, he trusts me. This person who has been wronged and dedicated my life more in deceiving people. As long as others believe you, no matter how absurd the lie is, it can be believed. Sean, this is what you owe me.